Being married to one of the most powerful women in North Korea sounds amazing, until you realize your wife could have you executed for looking at her the wrong way, and nobody even knows your name. Before we begin, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Yo Jong is the sister of Kim Jong Un, the supreme leader of North Korea. She's his closest advisor. She's been called the most powerful woman in North Korea. Some say she's the second most powerful person in the entire country. She controls information. She controls propaganda. She has the ear of the supreme leader. And she's absolutely ruthless. But here's something wild. She's married, she has kids, and her husband lives in complete obscurity. We don't even know his name for sure. There are rumors, theories, but nothing confirmed. He exists in the shadows, while his wife operates on the world stage. And when you think about what that must be like, when you really dig into the reality of being married to Kim Yo Jong, you start to realize it might be one of the worst positions a person could be in. So let's start with the obvious question. Who is this guy? Who did Kim Yo Jong marry? The most widely circulated name is Choi Song-hae. He's supposedly the son of Choi Rong-hae, who's a very high-ranking official in North Korea, a member of the elite, someone close to the Kim family. Which makes sense because in North Korea, you don't just marry whoever you want, especially if you're a Kim. Marriages are strategic, political. They're about maintaining power and loyalty within the inner circle. But here's the thing. We don't even know if that's actually his name. The North Korean government has never officially confirmed it. There are no photos of him, no public appearances, no statements, nothing. He's a ghost. Compare that to Kim Yo Jong. She's everywhere. She travels with her brother to international summits. She's been photographed with President Trump, with South Korean officials. She makes public statements. She threatens other countries. She's visible. She's powerful. She's known. Her husband? He's nobody. At least not in the public eye. And that's not by accident. That's by design. Because in North Korea, the Kim family is everything. They're worshipped like gods. They're the center of the entire country. And anyone who marries into that family has to understand their place, which is in the background, in the shadows, supporting the family, but never overshadowing them. Now imagine what that's like. You're married to one of the most powerful people in your country, but you can't talk about it. You can't be seen with her in public. You can't take pride in your wife's accomplishments, because acknowledging them would be acknowledging your own connection to power. And in North Korea, that's dangerous. Because here's the brutal reality of life in North Korea's elite circles. If you're too visible, if you have too much power, if you're seen as a potential threat, you disappear. And we're not talking about losing your job. We're talking about being executed or sent to a prison camp where you'll die slowly and painfully. This has happened over and over again in North Korea. Kim Jong Un has had his own family members killed. His uncle, Jong Song-taek, was executed in 2013. He was a powerful guy, close to the family, married to Kim Jong Un's aunt. And he was brutally killed, probably torn apart by anti-aircraft guns, according to some reports, though the exact method is disputed. Kim Jong Un also had his half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, assassinated in Malaysia in 2017, killed with a nerve agent in an airport. Why? Because he was a potential rival, a potential threat to Kim Jong-un's power. So if you're Kim Yo Jong's husband, you're living with this reality every single day. Your wife's brother has killed his own family members, and you're married into that family. You have to be perfect. You have to be invisible. You have to never, ever be seen as a threat. One wrong move, one moment of ambition, one time where you think maybe you deserve some recognition for being married to such a powerful woman, and you're done, gone, erased from existence. let's talk about what daily life might actually be like for this guy, because it's not what you'd think. When most people imagine being married to someone powerful, they think about luxury, nice houses, good food, travel, respect. And sure, there's probably some of that. The North Korean elite live very differently from regular North Koreans. They have access to imported goods, better food, better housing. They're not starving. They're not living in poverty. But that comfort comes with a price, and the price is constant surveillance, constant fear, constant performance. In North Korea, everyone is watched, but the elite are watched even more closely because they have access to information, they have connections, they have resources, which makes them both valuable and dangerous. So Kim Yo Jong's husband is probably being monitored constantly. His conversations are likely recorded, his movements tracked, his relationships scrutinized, because the regime needs to make sure he's loyal, that he's not plotting anything, that he's not a threat. And it's not just external surveillance, it's internal too. In North Korean elite families, there's a culture of informing on each other. People report suspicious behavior, they report disloyal statements, they report anything that might be seen as a threat to the regime. Because if you don't report it and someone else does, you're guilty by association. So this guy has to watch what he says, not just in public, but in private too. He has to be careful around his own family, his own friends, maybe even his own children, because anyone could be listening, anyone could report him. Now add to that the fact that his wife is Kim Yo Jong. She's not just powerful, she's known for being ruthless. She's been described as her brother's enforcer, the person who does the dirty work, the person who makes threats and follows through on them. She's threatened South Korea multiple times. She's been involved in propaganda campaigns. She's probably been involved in decisions about executions and punishments. She's not someone you want to cross. And this is the person this guy is married to, the person he shares a home with, the person he has children with. Can you imagine having an argument with your spouse when your spouse has the power to have you killed, when your spouse is known for being ruthless and unforgiving? Most marriage conflicts are about normal things: money, household responsibilities, parenting decisions. But when you're married to Kim Yo Jong, those conflicts take on a whole different dimension, because disagreeing with her isn't just a marital issue. It could be seen as disloyalty to the regime. It could be seen as disrespect to the Kim family, and that could get you killed. So this guy probably doesn't argue much. He probably agrees with everything she says. He probably supports every decision she makes, because the alternative is too dangerous. And that's not a marriage, that's survival. Kim Yo Jong reportedly has children, at least one, possibly more. And that adds another layer of complexity to this situation. In most families, having children is a joy. It's something to celebrate. It brings families together. But in the Kim family, children are political assets. They're potential heirs. They're symbols of the dynasty's continuation. And that means these children are being raised in an incredibly unusual environment. They're being raised to understand that their family is special, that they're descended from gods, essentially, according to North Korean propaganda, that they're destined to rule, or at least to be part of the ruling class. But they're also being raised to understand that power is dangerous, that family members kill each other, that loyalty is everything and trust is rare. What does that do to a kid? How do you grow up normal in that environment? And for Kim Yo Jong's husband, what's it like to be a father in that situation? Does he get to actually parent his children? Or is their upbringing controlled by the regime, by Kim Yo Jong, by the propaganda department? In North Korea, children of the elite are often educated separately from regular children. They go to special schools. They're taught by carefully selected teachers. They're raised to be loyal to the regime above all else, even above their own families. So this guy might not even have much say in how his own children are raised. The regime decides their education. The regime decides what they're taught. The regime decides who they interact with. And if his children grow up to be powerful, that could actually make his position even more dangerous. Because then he's not just the husband of a powerful woman, he's the father of powerful children. And that makes him a potential threat, a potential point of vulnerability, someone who could be used against his own family. It's twisted, it's paranoid, but that's how power works in North Korea. Everyone is a potential threat. Everyone has to be controlled. And family relationships are just another tool of control. One of the worst parts of being Kim Yo Jong's husband is probably the isolation. This guy can't have real friends. He can't trust anyone. He can't talk to anyone about his real feelings or experiences. Think about your own life for a second. When you're going through something difficult, who do you talk to? Your friends? Your family? A therapist? You have outlets. You have people you can confide in. Kim Yo Jong's husband doesn't have that. He can't talk to friends about his marriage because that would be revealing information about the Kim family. And revealing information about the Kim family is basically treason. He can't see a therapist because therapists don't really exist in North Korea the way they do in other countries. And even if they did, what therapist would be allowed to hear the private thoughts of someone married into the Kim family? He can't talk to his own family because they're probably just as controlled and monitored as he is, and anything he tells them could be used against him. So he's alone, completely alone, living with secrets he can never share, dealing with stress he can never express, experiencing things he can never talk about. That kind of isolation is psychologically devastating. Humans are social creatures. We need connection. We need to be able to share our experiences. We need to be understood. And when you can't do any of that, when you have to keep everything locked inside, it destroys you, slowly. And there's no escape. He can't just leave. You don't divorce a Kim. You don't walk away from that family. Once you're in for life. The only way out is death. Either natural death if you're lucky enough to live that long, or execution if you make a mistake. So this guy is trapped, completely and totally trapped, in a marriage he can't leave, in a life he didn't really choose, surrounded by people he can't trust, living in constant fear. To really understand how unique and difficult this situation is, let's compare it to other situations where someone married into a powerful family. Take the British royal family, for example. When someone marries into the royal family, they give up some privacy. They're in the public eye. They have to follow certain protocols, but they're also celebrated. They're photographed at events. They get titles. They have public roles. People know who they are. Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband, was the Duke of Edinburgh. Everyone knew who he was. He had his own causes and charities. He made public appearances. He had a role and an identity. Same with Kate Middleton when she married Prince William. She became the Duchess of Cambridge. She has her own projects, her own public image. People know her name. Even Meghan Markle, who had a really difficult time with the royal family and eventually left, was still a public figure. People knew who she was. She had an identity. She could speak. She could be seen. Kim Yo Jong's husband has none of that. He's invisible. He has no public role, no public identity, no title that anyone knows about. He's just the husband, the nobody married to somebody. Or look at the spouses of other political leaders, the first ladies or first gentlemen of various countries. They typically have public roles. They host events. They champion causes. They're part of their spouse's public image. But not in North Korea. In North Korea, the Kim family is the only thing that matters. Supporting characters don't get recognition. They don't get celebrated. They exist only to serve the family. and they do it silently. It's more like being married to a mob boss than being married to a political leader. You don't get the benefits of your spouse's power. You just get the danger, the paranoia, the constant threat. Here's another thing that probably makes this guy's life miserable. He has no agency, no control over his own life. His wife makes major decisions that affect the entire country. She threatens other nations. She shapes policy. She has real power. But he doesn't. He's just along for the ride, a passenger in his own life. He probably doesn't get to choose where he lives. That's decided by the regime. He probably doesn't get to choose what he does for work. That's decided by the regime. He probably doesn't get to choose who he associates with. That's decided by the regime. Every aspect of his life is controlled, and not just controlled by some abstract authority, controlled by his wife's family, by his brother-in-law, who's the supreme leader, by a system that sees him as a tool, not a person. And here's the really messed up part. He probably can't even express frustration about this, because expressing frustration would be seen as disloyalty. It would be seen as a criticism of the system, and criticism is not tolerated in North Korea. So he has to pretend to be happy, pretend to be grateful, pretend to be honored to be part of this family, even if inside he's miserable, even if inside he's screaming. He has to smile. He has to perform loyalty, because that's what survival requires. And that performance never ends. It's 24/7 for the rest of his life. He can never let his guard down, never show his true feelings, never be himself. He has to be the perfect, loyal, invisible husband forever. To understand why this guy's position is so terrible, we need to understand the history of the Kim dynasty and how they've treated people around them. The Kim family has ruled North Korea since 1948. That's 3 generations now. Kim Il-sung, the founder, Kim Jong Il, his son, and Kim Jong Un, the current leader. And throughout that entire time, they've maintained power through fear, propaganda, and brutal suppression of any threats. People who were once close to the family have been purged, executed, disappeared. It doesn't matter how loyal you've been in the past. If you're seen as a threat now, you're done. Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-thaek, is the perfect example. This guy was married to Kim Jong-un's aunt. He was a senior official. He'd been part of the regime for decades. And in 2013, he was arrested, put on trial, and executed. The charges? Corruption and trying to overthrow the state. But really, he was probably just seen as too powerful, too independent, too much of a potential rival. And his execution wasn't quiet. It was public. It was meant to send a message. This is what happens to people who get too powerful. This is what happens to people who threaten the family. After Jang Song-thaek was executed, his entire family was purged. His relatives were killed or sent to prison camps. His associates were investigated, and many were executed. Being connected to him became a death sentence. Now imagine being Kim Yo Jong's husband and knowing this history. Knowing that your wife's brother killed his own uncle, killed his own half-brother, has killed countless others, and you're supposed to feel safe? You're supposed to trust that you'll be okay as long as you're loyal? The historical precedent says otherwise. The historical precedent says that being close to the Kim family is dangerous, that even family members aren't safe, that loyalty means nothing if you're perceived as a threat. So this guy is living with that knowledge, living with the understanding that at any moment, for any reason, he could be the next one. He could be the next person whose execution is used to send a message. Let's talk more about Kim Yo Jong herself, because understanding who she is helps us understand what it must be like to be married to her. Kim Yo Jong isn't just powerful because of her last name. She's powerful because she's competent, she's smart, she's strategic, and she's ruthless. She's been her brother's right hand for years. She handles propaganda. She manages his image. She makes public statements on behalf of the regime. And she's good at it. She knows how to threaten other countries while maintaining plausible deniability. She knows how to manipulate the media. She knows how to play the game. In 2018, she went to the Olympics in South Korea. She was the center of attention. Western media was fascinated by her. They called her North Korea's Ivanka Trump, comparing her to the daughter of the then US president, who was also a close advisor. But that comparison is insulting to how powerful Kim Yo Jong actually is. She's not just an advisor. She's the enforcer. She's the person who makes things happen.
She's threatened to destroy the liaison office between North and South Korea, and then North Korea actually blew it up. She's threatened military action against South Korea multiple times, and those threats are taken seriously because they come from someone with real authority. She's also been involved in the regime's worst atrocities, the propaganda campaigns, the control of information, the punishment of dissent. She's not just adjacent to the regime's brutality, she's an active participant in it. So, what's it like to be married to someone like that? Someone who's responsible for so much suffering, someone who makes decisions that affect millions of people, someone who threatens war and carries out brutal policies. You'd have to either be completely on board with it, which makes you complicit, or you'd have to live with the knowledge that your wife is doing terrible things and there's nothing you can do about it. Either way, it's a moral nightmare. And you can't criticize her. You can't question her decisions. You can't suggest that maybe threatening to blow up South Korea isn't a great idea, because she's not just your wife. She's a high-ranking official. She's a Kim. And questioning her would be questioning the regime. So you just have to go along with it. Support her. Pretend that everything she does is right and justified, even when you know it's not. Even when you know people are suffering because of decisions she's making. You have to smile and nod and play your role. There's also an interesting gender dimension to this situation that makes it even more complicated. In most countries, even in 2024, there are still traditional gender expectations. The man is often expected to be the provider, the protector, the leader of the household. But in this relationship, those dynamics are completely reversed.
Kim Yo Jong is the powerful one. She's the one with status. She's the one making important decisions. Her husband is in the subordinate position. He's dependent on her. He's protected by her status, but also endangered by it. Now, there's nothing wrong with a woman being more powerful than her husband. In a healthy relationship, that's fine. People can have different roles and different types of power. But this isn't a healthy relationship. This is a relationship where one person has absolute power and the other person has none, where one person could literally have the other person killed. And in North Korean culture, which is very traditional and patriarchal, this dynamic is probably even more difficult. The man is supposed to be the head of the household, but Kim Yo Jong's husband can't be that. He can't even pretend to be that. His role is to support her, to stay in the background, to be invisible. That's got to be emasculating. Not because there's anything wrong with supporting your spouse, but because he has no choice. He has no power. He's not an equal partner. He's an accessory, a prop, someone whose only role is to help maintain the image of Kim Yo Jong as a married woman with a family, which helps humanize her and make her more acceptable to the Korean public. And he can't talk about how that makes him feel. He can't process those emotions. He just has to accept it, live with it, Pretend it's fine. Throughout history, there have been people in similar positions. Royal consorts who married into powerful families and had to navigate treacherous political situations.
Take Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. He was from a minor German royal family. He married the Queen of England, and his position was difficult because he had no official power. He wasn't even given the title of Prince Consort until years after they married. He was just the Queen's husband. But he also had Victoria's love and trust. He was her closest advisor. He had real influence, even if he didn't have official power, and eventually he was recognized and respected. Or look at Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband. He gave up his own naval career to support his wife. He had to walk 3 steps behind her in public. He couldn't even give his own children his last name, but he also had a public role. He had causes he championed. He was respected in his own right, and their marriage, by all accounts, was genuinely loving and supportive. Yo Jong's husband has none of that. He doesn't have the love story that Victoria and Albert had. He doesn't have the public respect that Prince Philip eventually earned. He doesn't have an independent role or identity. He's just there, in the shadows, unnamed, unknown, probably unloved in any real sense, because how could there be genuine love in a relationship with such a massive power imbalance and so much fear? The historical royal consorts at least had some dignity, some recognition, some role. Yo Jong's husband has nothing. He's less than a consort. He's a ghost. So what happens to this guy in the long run? What are the possible outcomes for someone in his position? Option 1. He lives a long life in obscurity. He stays invisible. He never makes a mistake. He never becomes a threat. And he eventually dies of natural causes, having spent his entire life in fear and isolation. That's probably the best-case scenario, and even that scenario is pretty bleak. Option 2. He makes a mistake. He says something wrong. He's seen talking to the wrong person. He's perceived as disloyal for some reason, real or imagined, and he's purged, executed, or sent to a prison camp. His children lose their father. His existence is erased from history. That's the nightmare scenario, and in North Korea, it's entirely possible. Option 3. Yo Jong falls out of favor. Maybe she makes a mistake. Maybe her brother turns on her for some reason. And when she goes down, he goes down with her, because he's connected to her. He's part of her household. And in North Korea, when someone is purged, their family usually goes down with them. So his fate is tied to hers. If she fails, he fails. He has no independent existence, no protection outside of his connection to her. Option 4. The regime collapses. North Korea opens up or is reunified with South Korea, and suddenly this guy's identity is revealed. He becomes public. And then what? Does he face justice for being part of the regime? For being complicit in Yo Jong's actions? Or is he seen as a victim, as someone who was trapped in an impossible situation? It's hard to say. But either way, his life would change dramatically. None of these outcomes are good. At best, he lives a long life of misery and fear. At worst, he's killed. There's no happy ending here, no scenario where things turn out well for him. Let's think about the psychological impact of living like this, because this isn't just a difficult situation. This is the kind of situation that breaks people. Constant fear does terrible things to your mind. It keeps your body in a perpetual state of stress. Your cortisol levels stay elevated. Your nervous system is always on high alert. Over time, that causes physical health problems, heart disease, high blood pressure, digestive issues, chronic pain. Your body literally breaks down under the stress. But the psychological damage is even worse. Living in constant fear leads to anxiety disorders, depression, PTSD. Your brain gets rewired to expect danger at every moment. You can't relax. You can't feel safe. You develop hypervigilance, where you're constantly scanning for threats. And in this guy's case, the threats are real, so his hypervigilance is justified. But that doesn't make it any less exhausting. The isolation compounds everything. Humans need social connection to maintain mental health. We need to be able to share our experiences, to feel understood,
to feel less alone. When you don't have that, when you're completely isolated with your fears and your experiences, your mental health deteriorates rapidly. And there's no help available. It's not like he can go to therapy. There's no mental health support system in North Korea, at least not for something like this. He can't take medication for anxiety or depression. He can't join a support group. He can't do any of the things that might help him cope. He just has to endure it, day after day, year after year, for his entire life. The only coping mechanism he probably has is dissociation, mentally checking out, going through the motions while his mind is somewhere else. It's a survival strategy, but it's not healthy. It's not living. It's just existing. And the worst part is that he probably can't even acknowledge that he's struggling, because acknowledging struggle would be acknowledging that something is wrong with his situation. And nothing can be wrong with being married into the Kim family. The Kim family is perfect. The regime is perfect. Everything is great. That's the official story. And he has to maintain that story, even to himself. Even in his own mind, he can't fully acknowledge how terrible his situation is, because that acknowledgement might lead to thoughts of disloyalty. And thoughts of disloyalty are dangerous, even if no one else knows about them. Because in a surveillance state, you never know who's listening. Maybe your thoughts aren't even private. Maybe they're monitoring you that closely. So he has to police his own thoughts, control his own emotions, suppress his own reality. That's psychological torture, and it's self-inflicted, because the external control is so complete that he does it to himself. Let's come back to the children for a minute, because their future is probably another source of stress for their father. These kids are growing up as part of the Kim dynasty. That's both a privilege and a curse. They'll have access to the best education available in North Korea, the best food, the best healthcare. They'll never starve. They'll never lack for material comfort.
But they're also growing up in a system that could turn on them at any moment. They're being raised to be loyal to the regime above all else. They're being indoctrinated from birth. And they're probably being watched just as closely as their father. If they're daughters, their futures are probably similar to Kim Yo Jong's. They'll be married off to other elite families. They'll be used to strengthen political alliances. They might have some role in the regime if they're competent and loyal, but their lives won't be their own. They'll be tools of the state. If they're sons, the situation is even more complicated, because male heirs in the Kim family are potential successors, which makes them valuable but also dangerous. They could be groomed for leadership, but they could also be seen as threats. Kim Jong Un killed his own half-brother, remember? Being a male heir in the Kim family doesn't guarantee safety. It might actually make you less safe. And their father has to watch all of this happen. He has to watch his children being shaped by this system, being indoctrinated, being controlled. And he can't do anything about it. He can't protect them from the regime because he's part of the regime. He can't teach them different values because those values would be seen as disloyal. He can't give them a different future because their future is already determined. All he can do is hope that they survive. Hope that they navigate the treacherous waters of the Kim dynasty successfully. Hope that they don't make mistakes. Hope that they're not seen as threats. That's not parenting. That's just watching helplessly while your children are consumed by a system you can't fight. Here's another weird aspect of this situation. The whole world is curious about Kim Yo Jong. She's fascinating to international observers. She's mysterious. She's powerful. She shows up at major international events. People want to know more about her. And by extension, people are curious about her personal life. Who's she married to? What's her husband like? What's their relationship like? These are questions that international media has tried to answer. There have been articles speculating about her husband's identity, reports trying to piece together information.
Human interest stories trying to understand the personal side of this powerful woman.
But for the husband himself, that attention is probably terrifying, because every time someone writes an article speculating about his identity, that puts him more at risk. It draws attention to him, and attention is dangerous in his position. The whole point of his existence is to be invisible. Anything that threatens that invisibility threatens his safety. And he has no control over it. He can't issue a statement asking people to leave him alone. He can't go on the record to set things straight. He just has to hope that the speculation dies down, that people lose interest, that he fades back into obscurity where he's safe. But the internet never forgets. Articles about him are out there forever. Photos, if any exist, could surface at any time. Information could leak, and all of that puts him in danger. Not from the international community, but from the North Korean regime. Because the regime wants control over information. They want to control the narrative, and speculation about Kim Yo Jong's personal life threatens that control. So this guy is caught in this bizarre situation, where the rest of the world is curious about him, but that curiosity is actively dangerous to him. The more people want to know about him, the worse his situation becomes. He needs to be forgotten. He needs to be ignored. But human nature makes that impossible. People are fascinated by the private lives of powerful people, and he's married to one of the most powerful people in one of the most secretive countries on Earth. Of course people are curious, but that curiosity could literally kill him. So why does it suck to be Kim Yo Jong's husband? Because he lives in constant fear. Because he has no identity. Because he's isolated and trapped. Because he has no agency over his own life. Because he's married to someone who could have him killed. Because he's raising children in a system that could destroy them. Because he has to suppress his own humanity just to survive. Because he's caught between international curiosity and domestic terror. Because his entire existence is defined by servitude and silence. He's probably one of the most trapped people on Earth. Not in a literal prison, but in a prison of circumstance, a prison of family connection, a prison of political necessity. And there's no escape, no way out, no hope for a better future. Most of us worry about normal things: job stress, relationship problems, money issues. But at least we have some control over our lives. We can make choices. We can change our circumstances. We can leave situations that don't work for us. Kim Yo Jong's husband has none of that. His life was probably decided for him. His marriage was probably arranged. His role was assigned. And now he just has to live it out, day after day, year after year, until he either dies naturally or is killed. That's not a life. That's a slow, grinding existence. It's a cautionary tale about the true cost of power, because people see the Kim family's power and might envy it, but they don't see the human cost. They don't see the fear, the paranoia, the loneliness, the complete absence of normal human connection and love. This guy gets to live in luxury while millions of North Koreans starve, but he's probably more miserable than most of them, because at least regular North Koreans can have genuine relationships with each other, as much as the system allows. They can trust their families, to some extent. They can have friends. They can have normal human connections. But Kim Yo Jong's husband can't. He's too close to power, too much of a potential threat, too dangerous to be allowed real relationships. So yeah, it sucks to be Kim Yo Jong's husband. It sucks in ways most people can't even imagine. And the worst part is, we'll probably never know his true story. We'll never hear from him. He'll live his entire life in silence and die in obscurity. And the world will never know what it really was like. We can only speculate. We can only imagine. But the reality is probably even worse than anything we can come up with, because reality in North Korea is always worse than the speculation, always darker, always more brutal. That's the real tragedy here. Not just that one man is trapped in this situation, but that we live in a world where situations like this can exist, where entire countries can be controlled by dynastic families, where human beings are treated as tools and props
rather than as people with inherent worth and dignity. Kim Yo Jong's husband is just one victim of a system that creates millions of victims. His suffering is unique in its specifics, but it's part of a much larger pattern of suffering that defines North Korea. And until that system changes, until that regime falls, there will continue to be people like him, people trapped by their connections to power, people whose lives are sacrificed on the altar of the Kim dynasty's survival. It's not just sad, it's evil, and it's a reminder that power without accountability, without democracy, without human rights, creates nothing but misery, even for the people who seem to benefit from it, even for the people married into the ruling family. Nobody really wins in a system like that. Some people just lose less than others. And Kim Yo Jong's husband is definitely not one of the winners. Hit subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden stories nobody talks about.